The family of Francis Walker heard this gruesome story of human remains found in a freezer on Washtenaw. They didn't realize that it was Francis Walker until late yesterday.
She didn't have any enemies. This is an exceptional circumstance. You're talking about good and evil there.
I could not imagine anyone that would kill a person like that.
Police were called to that apartment at least 5 times just last week.
Right, Joe and Erica, police were called here 5 times last week before they started getting calls about a missing person on Monday. We're told
Francis Walker was a kind-hearted landlord who wanted to help people get back on their feet. Her Chicago home was supposed to be a haven for those who needed it. But in October 2022, her generosity would lead to a chilling discovery, a story so shocking it left an entire community reeling. Francis Walker, 69, had spent years in her quiet Chicago home. Friends described her as a beacon of light in the West Ridge neighborhood, someone who would always lend a helping hand. She didn't just rent rooms in her house, she made her tenants feel like family. But one tenant, Sandra Kolalou, was about to shatter that trust in the most horrifying way. Francis had the biggest heart. She cared about everyone. It's hard to imagine anyone would want to hurt her, let alone someone living under her own roof. Sandra Kolalou, 36, was one of Francis's tenants, but things weren't exactly smooth sailing. Sandra wasn't paying rent. She fought with the other tenants, and Francis had been planning to evict her. What Francis didn't know was that this decision would cost her everything. October 10, 2022. Tenants in the house hadn't seen Francis for hours, and something felt off. There was a strong smell coming from the house, a mix of chemicals and, well, something worse. And Sandra was acting weird. Police were called to do a welfare check. At first, nothing seemed too out of place. But then, in the freezer, officers found something they'd never forget: human remains, dismembered, later confirmed to be Francis Walker.
The family of Francis Walker heard this gruesome story of human remains found in a freezer on Washtenaw. They didn't realize that it was Francis Walker until late yesterday. 59-year-old Francis Walker lived at this house on Washtenaw with her husband. They rented rooms to women over the years, and over the summer, her husband tells me that they were having trouble with one of the tenants. He described it as the woman was terrorizing other tenants. The husband is now overseas trying to get back. Now, Walker, well known here in the neighborhood for her talent as a pianist, as an organist, a woman of faith.
Well, she's a really good person, and bad things happen to good people sometimes. Nobody deserves what happened to her.
We are all in distraught right now. We don't know where to pick up the pieces when we heard about this incident yesterday.
She was extremely kind and giving. She always gave more than she took. And she always reached out to people that were isolated or marginalized.
It didn't take long for police to zero in on Sandra. Her behavior in the days leading up to Francis's disappearance was raising more than a few red flags. Now, Sandra wasn't exactly a model tenant. Other renters said she was hostile, unpredictable, and had even threatened people before.
I had expressed some concerns around the house. She did not seem worried or nervous.
Rodin says those concerns centered around Sandra Kolalou, a tenant in the house who had been served with an eviction notice after she made some tenants nervous. Walker even changed some of the locks for safety.
What she said was that Sandra had been going into the tenants in the basement, her bedroom, without permission, leaving notes, threatening notes saying, "Go back to your own country."
And knowing that this was over a possible eviction.
Fran's never been the one to say, "Get out this minute." You know, she gives you 30, 60 days. I can't imagine anything making somebody that angry to do something like that.
After Francis disappeared, Sandra wasted no time making herself the center of attention. She used Francis's credit card, ordered a tow truck to move Frances's car, and even tried to dispose of it at a remote location. When the tow truck driver asked about the car, Sandra seemed calm, like nothing was wrong. But police, they weren't buying it. They tracked the car and arrested Sandra on the spot, and that's when the whole picture started to come together.
They do believe that the dismemberment took place on the first floor of that residence.
New tonight, a woman accused of killing her landlord.
The gruesome murder leaves a North Side neighborhood reeling.
Anthony Ponce has details.
Along with announcing murder charges against the tenant for killing her landlord, CPD releasing some very distressing details about the crime that they say occurred here in the residence that they shared early Monday morning, namely that this suspect killed, then dismembered her body and was in the process of trying to cover her tracks when she was taken into custody.
Many of the tenants who lived in this house were afraid of this individual.
Afraid of 36-year-old Sandra Kolalou, pictured here in January after she was arrested for battery. Kolalou is now charged with first-degree murder in the death of her landlord, 69-year-old Frances Walker. Kolalou's landlord, who police say moved to evict her over the weekend after she exhibited aggressive behavior.
The deceased, the person who owns the residence, had actually served the defendant with like a notice to leave or an eviction notice. And that was done very recently. I don't want to get the day wrong, but I think it might have even been done as recently as of Saturday.
At 2:30 a.m. Monday, tenants here say they heard screams, and when they didn't see Walker emerge from her unit all day, alerted police.
The tenants and the police went in, and they were able to find some additional blood inside the tenant's room, at which point they discovered the gruesome remains in a freezer.
When officers arrived Monday evening, police say Kolalou had called a tow truck using Walker's credit card and was en route with the driver to Foster Avenue Beach, where she left her car and was in the process of concealing evidence in a lakeside trash can.
The garbage can was taken down to the medical examiner's office, and there were bloody rags and linens found in that garbage can.
Forensic evidence linked Sandra directly to the crime scene. Blood was found in the home, and witnesses described loud arguments between Frances and Sandra just hours before her disappearance. It was clear Sandra wasn't just a suspect, she was their main suspect. Frances didn't deserve this. She gave Sandra a place to stay when she had nowhere else to go, and this is how she was repaid. It's just heartbreaking. Sandra Kolalou was charged with first-degree murder, dismemberment, and concealing a homicidal death. But even with Sandra behind bars, Frances's community struggled to make sense of the tragedy. How could something so horrific happen in their quiet neighborhood? This case was about more than just murder. It was about trust, how one person's generosity was exploited in the worst way imaginable. Frances Walker's story is one of kindness, but also a cautionary tale. She opened her home to those in need, and for most, she was a lifesaver. But for one tenant, that kindness became an opportunity to take advantage and ultimately to destroy her. Her friends and neighbors still remember her as a beacon of hope in their community. And though her life was cut tragically short, her legacy of kindness lives on. In memory of Frances Walker, may her story remind us of the strength of kindness and the importance of vigilance. And that's the story of the Landlord Dismemberment Case, a tragedy in every sense of the word. Thanks for watching, and if you found this story as shocking as I did, don't forget to share your thoughts and stay tuned for more cases like this. Until next time, stay safe.